Hey guys, I want to make sure you have this reference for this, and it's also going to address the work that we had on Friday. This we've seen a bunch of times from 1763 to 1776, the increase in colonial anger. So we've got our events in order. We also have where colonial anger was based on each. So we had our proclamation of 1763 after the French and Indian War, then the writs of assistance and the Sugar Act that allowed the British to search a way to combat against smuggling. Then we have the Stamp Act. Remember, the Stamp Act was a bit different because it was a tax that affected pretty much everybody, anyone who was using these paper goods, as opposed to the earlier acts that we saw were really more about imports, exports, and people who might be smuggling. So we see the anger come way up. We then have the Stamp Act Congress come together. When the going gets tough, the tough get organized. It's kind of the theme we were running with. The Stamp Act Congress leads to the Stamp Act being repealed. Notice it's red, and the red things here are British action. So the British are the ones that repealed this because they saw the argument that the colonists were making. So they do get rid of the Stamp Act. It's a good thing for the colonists, but the British need to find a way to get those taxes because they need to pay for that French and Indian War and the 10,000 soldiers that they've sent to keep from having another war. Right. So then we have the Declaratory Act, which we kind of said this is the British saying, don't forget, we are the boss. We can make laws whenever we want. And that next law that's going to come is the Townshend Act, which a lot of people saw as a Stamp Act Part 2. Keep in mind the British needed money. They needed to pay for the war and the protection. So here they were again taxing everyday items. This led to a boycott. We call it the Boston Non-Importation Agreement. So the anger comes down a bit because now there's action being taken place. If there are going to be these extra taxes, then the colonists say, we're not going to do this. We're not going to buy these things. This then comes to 1770 with the Boston Massacre, and we know this story. 5 people die. Paul Revere does his best to make sure that the colonies know it. It helps unify. And due to this 3-year gap, we can look at this and say the British kind of got the point. Right? They went a little bit too far. Things are getting ugly, so let's relax. Then in 1773, we'll get to the Tea Act, which will not, as many people think, increase the taxes on tea, but actually make it cheaper. They just told the colonists where they had to buy their tea from. So this leads to the Boston Tea Party, which we can look back and look at as really an act of terrorism, as they threw over $1 million worth of tea into Boston Harbor. And now we get into the nice cause and effect. So from the Tea Act, we enter the Boston Tea Party, and the British response to the Boston Tea Party are the Intolerable Acts. Here we have them a bit more specific with the closing of the Port of Boston, the change of the charter in Massachusetts, and a limitation of self-government, and the Justice Act, where we said any British officials can be tried either in another colony or back in England, which is going to allow them to get get away with a lot more things. Going's getting tough. Here's another sign of organization with the First Continental Congress. The First Continental Congress says that we need to create militias, untrained military army for each colony, which is good because when we get to the battles of Lexington and Concord on April 19th, 1775, the Massachusetts militia is going to be there to, put up a front against the English. So we have the Battle of Lexington and Concord, which really ends with the British being pushed back to Boston. We have the Second Continental Congress that then does quite a few things, many of which we haven't discussed just yet. But for our argument, we have a full Continental Army that's going to be created. George Washington is going to be appointed the commander. He won't be at the Battle of Bunker Hill, but the army is ready to go. And we see this as that Pyrrhic victory, the battle that the colonists don't win, but they've got a lot of confidence coming out of it. We then have the siege this actually comes within the siege, but after April, after the battles of Lexington and Concord, the British are going to be surrounding Boston. Battle of Bunker Hill is a part of that story. And then we saw recently, March 17th, 1776, that the British will be forced out of Boston due to the cannons on Dorchester Heights. And it's not long before the colonists declare their independence. So there we have from 1763 to 1776. Right? We see the events in order. We see the up and down of the anger, the emotion of the colonists to the point where they finally say, we are out of here. So we'll leave that and we'll look at this. This should look familiar as well. This is our colonial attitude chart. Your answers may be a little bit different, and as long as you can defend them, that's fine. But I want to go over this, make sure you have an answer key. First thing to point out is that instead of checks, because of it's just a lot easier to just use X's because it's on the computer, obviously. So my checks are X's. Please don't let that bother you too much, especially since I get on you if you're not following directions. Right, but here you go, just looking at some things, right? As you come through, you see a lot of things are going to increase colonial anger. Makes a lot of sense. We'll see the decrease of colonial anger here and there. Notice Stamp Act being repealed, First Continental Congress, the British being forced out. All right, a lot of these things have to do with colonial actions. Here you have a small X for the Boston Tea Party because it wasn't a huge success. You know, it gets a lot of love nowadays because of, you know, just really the way that we think about things. But this wasn't huge for people outside of Boston. Right? Look at the increase in British anger. Note that most of it's toward the end. Right? The British kind of doing their thing. This is the way that mercantilism goes. But later on, you'll see the anger increases. They'll decrease here with the intolerable acts, just on the idea of, you know, sometimes it feels good to punish. You know, if you've ever yelled at somebody, you know, a lot of times in the short term it feels pretty good. It obviously didn't get them too far. And the biggest thing that I was hoping you'd get out of this, if you did it well, or now that you're looking at the answers, right? The increase in colonial confidence. The whole time we've been talking about anger, you know, increased anger and asking people to do things. But here we get to this confidence piece, and as you can see, right, it's really obvious that toward the end, right, once we get into this organization of the First Continental Congress, and the fighting begins with Concord, the British being forced back to Boston, the organization of the Second Continental Congress, where all 13 colonies come together, the victory, if you will, at Bunker Hill, because of how many British soldiers they kill, the fact that they are able to stand up to the most powerful military in the world. Right? The confidence is growing, the confidence is growing as the confidence is growing. Finally, with forcing the British out and with the Declaration, we have this unified, confident American group. If you take this, just to kind of show you in one more form, right? Here you see the exact same thing, except I've manipulated it a little bit. Right? Same events, but right, I've changed a couple things here. Increased colonial anger is still the black X's. The red is a decrease in colonial anger, which wasn't really uniform. It's here and there, so I got rid of it. The green was a decrease in British anger, which only happens once, again with that punishment from the intolerable acts, so we said see you later. So we've really got our big three, right? And we just took all the X's that were here, pushed them over into the first column. And I think by doing that, you see a pattern here. Early on, we've got the colonists getting angry. You've got mercantilism, you've got the navigation acts, you've got these taxes and these acts to pay for the French and Indian War. The colonists are not happy. Right? As we go, and we start to get into action, the pushback is going to lead to an increase in British anger. Right? So this makes a lot of sense. But the big piece, again, and what we were just talking about with the prior screen, is leading to an increase in colonial confidence. And if the colonists have any chance of getting their independence, they're going to need high confidence against the most powerful country on the planet.